All right, so we're going to keep on our journey through chapter 13, and we're moving on to the fungi. And as I'm recording these lectures, I'm having to record off the PDF files because when I looked at them when I was recording off the PowerPoint, it made all this super dark and you couldn't see. So if it looks a little fuzzy, I apologize. I don't know why Collaborate does that, but I'll put the original PDF files so you can refer back to them to look for a little bit more detail, and the images will be a little bit more crisp. So moving on to the next kingdom, when you think about fungi, I always think this is cool. They're actually more closely related to animals than they are plants. You wouldn't think a little mushroom like that. When you think about that, you think of in the grocery section, it's with all the rest of the produce, that has to be a plant, but it's actually closely related to us. Now, they do have a cell wall, which is going to be made of chitin and glucan. And chitin is what you'll see in a lot of the arthropods that we'll talk about in the animal kingdom. Now, they are going to be heterotrophic because they use complex compounds as sources of energy. They don't go through the process of photosynthesis. They are decomposers, and they play a key role in the environment because we have to break down things into the smaller elements and cycle them back into the environment. Now, some of them do live off dead organic matter. So these guys are super, super important. They will go through multiple processes of reproduction. Some of them reproduce sexually or asexually, and some will actually do both. You're going to see most of these guys are non-motile. And there's all kinds of diversity when it comes to this group too. Like I said, there's a lot of diversity in life, and the fungi is another group there's a lot going on with it. Now, some of them will have these positive or beneficial mutualistic associations, especially when we talk about lichens, mycorrhizae, but some can also cause serious infections. So there's the good and the bad, and it's just like with the bacteria and just with the protists. You're going to see diverse. Some are going to be unicellular yeast, which are very essential for our studies in biology, and they're going to be multicellular also. And there's a wide diversity. We have about 100,000 species identified, but there's probably about 1 million more that exist that have yet to be identified. So when we talk about the structure of them, you're probably used to the typical mushroom shape right here. But we break it up into two morphological stages, the vegetative and reproductive. Now, the vegetative is going to be characterized by these tangles that you look at them right here. And these are slender-like, thread-like things. So these are called hyphae. They kind of look like the roots of plants, sorry, not the rufae, roots of plants. And they're going to reach and attach onto whatever the fungus is growing on. So you'll see a lot of these underground. And I think in one of the videos it talks about one of the largest fungus, it covers miles. It's really cool. Now, when you have a mass of hyphae together, it will be called a mycelium. So a big group together will be a mycelium. Now, they can come together to form what's called a fruiting body. So it's a bunch of hyphae together. And this is what you're more used to seeing. Now, the fruiting body is what's going to be producing the spores, and it's also going to be essential for reproduction. They're going to be produced on the surface of the food source, so the reason they do that is for the spores to be released and then easily spread about. Now, as I mentioned, they go through both sexual and asexual reproduction. Now, when it comes to reproduction by asexual reproduction, they can do it by fragmentation, budding, or producing of spores. And fragmentation is just like it sounds. It's where they take fragments of their hyphae and they just kind of fragment off to form new colonies. It'll just separate into different pieces, and then go and form a separate mycelium on its own. Now, some of them, these are examples of little yeast right here, they'll go through the process of forming buds. So it's just like a small little bud forming off of it, and eventually it'll get its own nucleus, and then it will just go through the process of mitosis and detach itself from the mother cell. So it's an exact clone of the mother one right there. Now, when someone will go through the process of making these asexual reproduction, they're going to make spores, which are going to be genetically identical to the parent. And then they'll have this little cap right here. So here's like an example of a puffball mushroom. And then they will release these spores into the air or outside environment. and then those will be carried off away and ride on with another animal or through the wind into another location. And I know this will look kind of confusing, but this is asexual reproduction right here, where you just take your mycelium, which is those long slender fragments, and you can go through the process of mitosis, making copies of individual cells, which are then the spores, and then these spores can go through the process of germination, and we just repeat this process over and over again. Now, if you're going to go through sexual reproduction, it's going to go through 3 stages right here. Now, the first one is called plasmogamy. It's a marriage or union of cytoplasm. So basically what's happening is you're going to have haploid cells. Remember haploid and diploid. So haploid has half the number of chromosomes, diploid has the full set. So the mycelium are haploid cells. They only have 1 copy of each chromosome. So that's how they just kind of go through the part. That's how they exist happily. They can go through mitosis and make a copy of themselves, and the process goes around and around. Now, if you're going through sexual reproduction, and remember it's a combination of 2 haploid cells to make a diploid. So plasmogamy is when you have 2 haploid cells from 2 different mycelia. So here's one, and then you're going to have a different one. They're going to come together, and they're just going to kind of fuse. So at this point, the cell has 2 nuclei. Now next is called charogamy, nuclear marriage. So what happens is these 2 nuclei fuse together. Boom, so now we're at 2N, and now we have the initial zygote. So then we go through this process of meiosis. So remember, meiosis is where we go through the process. We went from 1 cell to 4. In this process, they're going to form these 1N spores. And then these spores can be released through the process of germination back into mycelium, and the process goes over and over again. When we get the plants, you're actually going to hate this kind of stuff because they have the gametophyte, the sporophyte generations. Oh, it just gets confusing, but keep with it. Don't stress too much. So how do we organize this? I'm not going to talk in too much detail because the book doesn't go into super detail about fungi. They just give it a good, nice little subsection. We're going to break it up into 5 major phyla, and they break it up by their mode of reproduction or some molecular data they have on them. And just by looking at these images, there's a lot of diversity between just among them within this kingdom. So we're going to have the Kytridomycota, or the Kytrids, the Zygmycota, where they're the conjugated fungi, the Ascomycota, the Basidomycota, and the Glomeromycota. I'm doing better than these than I was on the protist. So let's talk about each of these groups just a little bit. So the Kytrids, these are going to be your very simple. So the very first fungi are the ancestors of the whole kingdom fungi, or this group right here. They're about 500 million years old, very, 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 very old, but they are mostly found in aquatic environments, and if they were on land, it would be very moist areas. These are some of the different images I could find of them. They kind of look like little bitty sea monsters right there. Now, they are saprobes, but others are actually parasites, and they can be harmful to amphibians and other animals, so they can be quite not a good thing to come across. Now, they do have chitin in their cell walls, but some of them also have cellulose. So this is a group that is kind of breaking the rules a little bit. They have that cellulose along with chitin. Now, most of them are going to be unicellular, but you're also going to find some that happen to be multicellular. Now, Zygomycota, this is probably one that you probably encounter the most often. This is going to be like your bread mold, your fruit mold, and your veggie mold. So this is the stuff that destroys stuff that you find in the back of the fridge or in the pantry. Now, it does thrive on decaying material, and we use this quite often. It's bread mold, or mold in general, is an intermediate in making a lot of the semi-synthetic steroid hormones. So yeah, it destroys a lot of your stuff, but we actually use it for other good uses too. So the Ascomycota, a lot of them are going to fall in this category. You're going to find a lot of diversity. They're going to be used for baking, brewing, and wine making. A lot of my favorite things are here. You're going to have examples for the yeast, morels, and truffles fall into this group right here. And yeast are very popular in biology laboratory. So we use a lot of them for cell biology experiments. It's a simple eukaryote that we can actually study. The causes of athlete's foot and yeast infections fall into this group too. Now, penicillin is produced by fungi in this group, and this is a cool little video about how penicillin was discovered, because actually it is a happy accident from a very messy scientist. So it's a really cool video. Highly advise you watch it, and then you have another useless fact to share with friends and family. So the Basidiomycota are the club fungi. These are the ones you're most familiar with, probably. I'm a big mushroom person. I love to eat them in a lot of my different foods. And most edible fungi fall into this group. So you're going to see the jelly, the shelf fungi, mushrooms, puffballs, stinkhorns, certain yeast, rust smuts. It all sounds all fun when it comes down to it. And the Glomeromycota, are the imperfect fungi, fall into this group, and this is one of the best images I could find of them. They are in close association with roots of trees, so they have this mutually beneficial relationship with them. So the tree will give them some nutrients, they give some nutrients to the trees. Like I mentioned right here, there's not a lot of information out there about this group. But I kind of want to wrap up a little bit about fungi, about their uses and, you know, the good and the bad. Because like I mentioned, the book only gives them a good solid little paragraph. Now, they are key decomposers of the environment. They're going to break down organisms into their smaller nutrients so we can recycle them. When we get to the biogeochemical cycles, it's as boring as it sounds, you'll understand what I'm talking about, or this right here. Now, they are a key food source, and we use them a lot for fermentation. So the beers and the wines, oh yes, right there, they're key for roles in that. If you ever, if they've opened things back up to normal, go to the breweries and go to the tours. They love to talk about this, and especially fermentation. You'll be like, oh my gosh, it's really cool. Yeast, cheeses, a lot of great stuff that we get thanks to fungi. As I mentioned, medicine, penicillin, that cool video that I told you how it was discovered, and certain cancer drugs are from this kingdom. Now, some of them do have beneficial relationships, like the mycorrhizae associated with plant roots, and also lichens are also in this group right here. So this is a video that talks about 10 amazing fungi. I think it's like really cool. It has all kinds of different things on there, and it's one of those, wow, you never knew it videos, and it's really cool. I try to find cool things and put them out there for you. And they're not all good. There's bad too. As with every kingdom, you have the good and the bad. So they rot things. You know, their job is to decompose, and sometimes they do a really good job of it. They will rot food, clothing, and pretty much anything made from lumber and paper will be rot eventually by fungi. Some of them are parasites, so athlete's foot, yeast infections, ringworm. A lot of plant infections fall from this category right here. Now, they can be, I guess, beneficial or problematic, depending on how you look at it, hallucinogenic chemicals. The ergot fungus is used to make LSD, and, you know, it's temporary insanity, can be fatal depending on how much you take, which is really kind of cool. It links to the Salem witch trial. So there was some crops that were ergot infested in this area right here, and a lot of the symptoms of witches curses were thanks to ergot poisoning, and this was really high in the humid season. So when the humid season ended, you know, you didn't see as many of the poisonings, the witch symptoms, and all the other stuff. So it kind of ended. So it's kind of interesting how mushrooms are linked to the Salem witch trials. So not much on them. Here's 2 videos if you're kind of interested in a little bit more, and then of course all my credits.